Being ranked as the #1 overall recruit is a very prestigious honor because it quite literally means nobody's better than you. Technically, you're the best of the best. However, with that being said, a lot, and I mean a lot of pressure comes with it. In today's video, we're going to take a look at what happened to every single #1 recruit from the year 2000 all the way up into our current date and time. This is going to be an extremely long video, so strap in, buckle up, get you a snack, get you a popcorn, get your favorite meal you like to eat when you're watching video, because trust me, I do the same thing. But alright, man, blah blah blah, shut the crap up. Now without further ado, let's get into it. To start things out, in the year of 2000, the #1 overall recruit in the nation was no other than DJ Williams. Oh yeah, too, I forgot to say this earlier. Do not expect me to go into full detail with every single one of these players. Obviously, we have a lot of guys to talk about, and I don't want to spend too long talking about one certain player because it's already going to be a long video in itself. So if there are some parts of these guys' stories that I don't talk about and you feel like I forgot to mention it, more likely I didn't forget about it, I just didn't feel like it was important. So with that being said, let's get into DJ Williams' story. In high school, this guy was an absolute monster on the defense and offensive side of the ball. He was known as a defensive player, but I hate to just throw him in that box because on offense, he was unreal. He broke the school record for touchdowns in a season with 42. This was a linebacker, by the way. He had 33 rushing touchdowns, 5 receiving touchdowns, 3 punt return touchdowns, and 1 kickoff return touchdown. I'm going to say it again. A linebacker did that. Safe to say, nobody was arguing with him being ranked as the #1 overall recruit. When he got done with high school, he decided to go all the way across the country and commit and sign with Miami, aka the U. At first, Miami was recruiting him as a linebacker, but when he got to campus, Miami had so many great linebackers, they wound up switching him over to fullback. Didn't really do too much his first year there, had a couple of touchdowns, but the year after, in 2001, he switched back to linebacker. He had a really solid career at Miami. In his junior year, he had 108 tackles, had 4 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, and broke up 8 passes. His senior season was about the same, and in 2004, when he entered the NFL draft, he got selected in the first round with the 17th overall pick by the Denver Broncos. It didn't take him long to make an impact for the Broncos because in his rookie season, he started every single game but 2 and had 114 tackles that led the team. He had a really solid NFL career that lasted roughly 10 years, and outside of a 6-game suspension for a failed drug test, not too much more to say. Forgot to tell you guys this as well. With all these players, when we get done talking about them at the end of their stories, we're going to ask the question, did they live up to the hype? For DJ Williams, I would say absolutely. I think he did. Star player in college, I'd argue and say star player in the NFL. That gets a check from me. In the year 2001, the #1 overall player in the nation was Kevin Jones. Mr. Kevin Jones grew up in Pennsylvania, where most people expected him to commit and sign with Penn State, but he didn't do that. He signed with Virginia Tech. His signing day was really interesting because he ripped off his shirt and underneath it was a Michael Vick jersey, which obviously signaled he was going to Virginia Tech. A lot of people are on the record stating he is the one who made wearing a hat, shirt, or whatever for signing day famous. Do as you please with that information. When he got onto campus at Virginia Tech as a true freshman, he won the starting job. In his freshman season in 2001, he had 175 carries for 957 yards, averaging 5.5 yards per carry with 5 touchdowns. Not bad. Second year in 2002, splitting carries with the other running back, he had 871 yards, averaging right at 5.5 yards per carry again with 9 touchdowns. And last but not least, in his junior season, he went off. Had 281 carries for 1,647 rushing yards, averaging 5.9 yards per carry with 21 touchdowns. After that season, he forgoed his final year eligibility his senior year and got selected in the first round with the 30th overall pick by the Detroit Lions in the 2004 NFL Draft. And for the Lions, he was really good, especially in his first season. He had 241 carries for 1,133 yards with 5 touchdowns. After that, his career went on a downhill slope, and the main reason for that was injuries. He had a couple season-ending injuries, and long story short, his career fizzled out. By 2011, he officially retired, and he returned to Virginia Tech to finish his degree. As where it stands today, he is still coaching football, and he is a running backs coach, so congrats to him for that. As far as it goes for Jones, I would say yeah, he lived up to the hype. Was outstanding in college, had a great rookie season in NFL. The only thing that derailed his career was injuries. In 2002, the #1 overall player in the nation was no other than the man, the myth, the legend himself, Vince Young. Since we know a lot about Vince Young, I'm not going to talk about his story too much. You know what happened. Went to Texas, beat USC in that magical, one of the best championship games of all time. Went to the NFL, had some would say good, others would say a wishy-washy career. I feel like we need to make an entirely separate Vince Young video because he had such a controversial career. The Titans didn't really help him out, but when you look at his stats and numbers, he didn't help himself out either. In his first year at Tennessee, 12 touchdowns, 13 INTs. The year after, 9 touchdowns to 17 INTs. That's awful. Granted, he did clean up the INTs later in his career, but it was all too little, all too late. I'll ask you guys, let me know in the comments section. Do you think Vince Young lived up to the hype? In college, I'd say yes, not even a question. In the NFL, I'd say, I don't know, it's close. One day down the road, we'll make a separate Vince Young video and we'll talk all about it. But for now, we gotta move on. And the number 1 overall recruit in the class of 2003 was Ernie Sims. This was another linebacker that's kind of crazy how we've only talked about a few guys and a couple of them were linebackers. Nowadays, you're not going to see that too much. But anyways, Ernie Sims, he was a heck of a player. How good was he, you may ask? Great question, my friend. I'd love to answer it. As an 8th grader, he was already starting on varsity. He led his team to not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 state championships. Listen to these insane numbers. As a junior, he had 180 total tackles. That's not for his career, that's one season. 41 of those were for loss, had 12 sacks, and forced 7 fumbles. He also, very similar to the other player we already talked about, was a running back. He had 17 touchdowns on offense that season, which is ridiculous. He was playing almost every single snap on both sides of the ball. His senior season was a carbon copy paste, and there wasn't a question about it. He was the number 1 player in the nation, and it wasn't even close. On signing day, he made it official. He was going to sign with the Florida State Cinnamon Rolls. This was a big pickup for them, and it was a great fit for Ernie Sims because he thrived in their system. I wouldn't say he had a ridiculous career for Florida State, but everyone knew he was just trying to get to the NFL. For that reason alone, it didn't shock anybody when he announced he was going to forego his senior year of eligibility. In the 2006 NFL Draft, with the 9th overall pick, he was selected by the Detroit Lions. As a rookie, he made an immediate impact. He had 124 tackles. In 2010, he did wind up getting traded to the Philadelphia Eagles, and in 2011, the Colts, and last but not least in 2012, the Dallas Cowboys. And once he got traded to the Eagles, or I'd really say around 2009, his last year with Detroit, that's when his career was going downhill. The last stop he made was with the Arizona Cardinals in 2015, and nothing ever came out of that. Fast forward time a little bit to the year 2018, he was hired as the strength and conditioning coordinator for Florida Atlantic. In 2020, he was hired by South Florida as a defensive quality control analyst. Most recently in 2023, UCF hired him as a linebackers coach. And last but not least, we got a super recent update on him. Guess where he's at now? Back home at Florida State as a defensive analyst. What about that, man? That is a full circle moment. Started at Florida State and somehow, some way, ended back up there. Love to see it. And also, I love to see that Ernie Sims is giving back to the game, and major congratulations to him for that and all the success he's achieved on and off the field. In 2004, the number 1 overall recruit in the nation was Adrien Peterson. Good old AP, and come on, man. You know how his story went, but I'll give you a brief summary. Listen to these numbers. As a junior in high school, he had 2,000 rushing yards, average 8.3 yards per carry with 22 touchdowns. If that wasn't good enough for you, as a senior, he had 3,000 rushing yards, averaging 11.7 yards per carry, so he averaged a first down with 32 touchdowns. He was so good as a high schooler, people were arguing about whether or not he was good enough to skip college and go straight to the NFL, which we know you can't do, but the fact people were even having those conversations was ridiculous. But I tell you what, I firmly believe Adrien Peterson, he was ready for a league as a high schooler. He was on their level, and as we all know, he committed and signed with Oklahoma, where he completely went off. As a freshman, looking back at these numbers, insane. He had 1,925 rushing yards, averaged 5.7 yards per carry with 15 touchdowns. Sophomore year was good, junior year got cut short, and he decided to go to the NFL early, which was the right decision. In the 2007 NFL Draft, the Minnesota Vikings selected him in the first round with a 7th overall pick. Turned out to be an outstanding pick because he is arguably to this day probably the best running back I've ever seen with my 2 eyes. Prime Minnesota Vikings, Adrien Peterson, whew. It was something serious. I'm not going to read off all these numbers. I'll let you take a look at it for yourself. Look at how consistent he was. His longevity at the running back position, it is really something to admire. Of course, after the year 2015, his career did slightly go downhill, but to be that good for that long, you don't see it a lot, especially, and I can't harp on this enough, at the running back position. It's the most expendable position in the NFL, and he was an outlier. So good, man, so good. And even in 2018, when he's supposed to be on a decline, he still had 1,000 rushing yards in that season with Washington. Of course, there's some controversies with Adrien Peterson we could divulge into, but I feel like that's a different video for a different day. Not really trying to get into all that because that is a extremely long story and long situation. Did Adrien Peterson live up to the hype in college and in the NFL? Yes, I think so. In 2005, the #1 overall recruit in the nation was a position we haven't talked about up until this point, offensive tackle Eugene Monroe. The reason for Mr. Eugene Monroe not just being the #1 offensive tackle in the nation, but the #1 overall player in the nation, is because of how polished he was as a high school recruit. According to scouts, he had the quote-unquote perfect footwork, balance, and excelled as a run and pass blocker, and he could dominate the run game. And I know what you're thinking, okay, he probably committed and signed with some big blue blood. No, he signed with, and you'll never guess this, if you didn't know already leading up into this video, Virginia. Fun fact of the day, guess who started over him? The man, the myth, the legend himself, D'Brickashaw Ferguson. Only people with some real ball knowledge remember D'Brickashaw Ferguson. Shout out to him. Anyways, he was the backup to him at left tackle, so meanwhile, he played right guard. He had a solid career for Virginia, and when it was all said and done, he was selected in the first round with the 8th overall pick in the 2009 NFL Draft by the Jacksonville Jaguars. Played with the Jaguars for 5 years and eventually would be traded to the Baltimore Ravens in 2013. Unfortunately, he battled a ton of injuries, could never get healthy, and in 2016, he announced his retirement. Another thing that made his retirement extremely easy was he made a lot of money in the NFL in a short amount of time. One thing I found interesting is he did state one of the main reasons for his retirement was concerns about head trauma that he was suffering throughout his career. Hopefully he's been enjoying retirement. I would say yeah, he lived up to all the hype. In 2006, the #1 overall recruit in the nation was another person on the O-line, offensive guard Andre Smith. Here's how good Andre Smith was in high school. He won Mr. Football in the state of Alabama. He was the only offensive lineman to ever do that. He was a force to be reckoned with. As far as it goes for his recruitment process, he kept it in the same state and committed inside with Alabama. Let's make a long story short, at Bama, he was a monster, and when he got done with his collegiate career, he was selected in the first round with the 6th overall pick by the Cincinnati Bengals. He was with the Bengals all the way up into 2015, where he was a very solid player for him, but right around 2015-2016, that's where his career started going downhill. And when I say decline, don't get it twisted, he was still good, but he was just getting in the later stages of his career. And he would stay in the NFL all the way up until the year 2021. Now he is no longer playing. In 2007, the #1 overall player in the nation was a running back that goes by the name of Joe McKnight. And man, oh man, some of y'all may remember, you gotta be an OG. We've already made a separate Joe McKnight video. That dude was the truth, and let's go over what happened with him. Joe McKnight's high school career had a bit of a controversy on the recruiting side of things. So apparently and allegedly, Reggie Bush, former USC running back, he was helping Pete Carroll recruit McKnight to come to USC. You may be sitting there saying, okay, Matt, what's the big deal about that? Well, alumni can't persuade recruits. Do I think it's a big deal? Not really, but technically at the time, they were breaking the rules. You may be sitting here wondering, well, Matt, how did they find out that Reggie Bush was even talking to Joe McKnight? Great question, my friend. I have an even better answer. In an interview, Joe McKnight slipped up and stated that he was talking to Reggie Bush before his commitment. So that's what had everybody going, well, wait a minute. You can't do that. That's illegal. So then McKnight and his high school head coach had to come out and make another statement saying that McKnight, he misspoke about that, he lied about it, and it never happened. After that whole debacle, it kind of got swept under the rug. He still committed and signed with USC. Surprisingly enough, he wasn't exactly good for USC, and he struggled. When I say struggled, he was good for your average running back, but not for your #1 overall recruit in the nation. First year, 500 yards. Second year, 650 yards. Final year in 2009, 1,000 yards. Didn't really jump off the board at you like an Adrien Peterson in Oklahoma. Heading into his sophomore year, you had people talking about he might win the Heisman Trophy, but that year, it just wasn't good. He had some medical conditions going on, injuries, and he also had some fumble problems. To make things even weirder, in 2006, as a junior, he was gifted a Land Rover by a businessman who was somehow, someway associated with USC. It was supposed to be kept on the low, but Joe McKnight, he was driving it around 24/7, so obviously people were going to point to it and say, hey, How did he buy that? USC wound up launching their own investigation and they suspended him for the bowl game that season, which really didn't matter too much because that was his final year before announcing he was going to forego his final year eligibility and enter the 2010 NFL Draft. He did fall in the draft quite a bit. He was selected in the 4th round with the 112th overall pick by the New York Jets. Didn't do too much with the Jets. He had an insignificant role. They even tried switching him over to cornerback to get him some reps there. They officially released him in the year 2013, and he sat out that entire season before getting signed in 2014 by the Chiefs. Seemed like it was going to be a new opportunity for him, but unfortunately, he tore his Achilles. That was the end of his NFL career, however, not the end to his football career because in 2016, he would head to the CFL, which is the Canadian Football League. But this is where our story takes a drastic, and I mean a drastic turn, and I hope you are ready for this. In 2016, while he's still playing in the CFL, he was involved in a road rage incident. Sadly, this led to the other person shooting a gun at him, and yeah, that ended his life. Very sad situation and story, and according to multiple witnesses, the guy who shot him screamed out after he shot him, quote unquote, "I told you not to F with me." I think we all know this. Road rage is a serious thing and problem, but this, come on man, it's just another level. Believe it or not, I still think about this story till this day. If I'm in traffic and somebody cuts me off, I'll let them win the war because it's not worth things escalating to something like this. Or not the war, my apologies. Let them win the battle, whatever you want to call it. People are crazy. You don't know what type of day they're having, and you doing something crazy back to them, even though they started it could lead to something bad. R.I.P. Joe McKnight. Prayers and thoughts go out to his family and everyone that's affected by that. In 2008, the #1 overall recruit in the nation was Daquan Bowers. Mr. Daquan Bowers plays high school football in South Carolina, where he was a defensive end and running back. In his senior season, he had 97 tackles, with 33 of those being for loss and 14 sacks. On the flip side of the ball as a running back, he had 1,200 rushing yards with 19 touchdowns, and he caught 2 passing touchdowns. Not bad if you gotta ask me, but obviously his main position was defensive end. He committed and signed with Clemson, where he easily lived up to the hype, and he might have surpassed him in some people's eyes. In 2010, as a junior, he was named ACC Defensive Player of the Year. It's crazy how fast his game went to another level. In 2008, he had 1 sack. In 2009, he had 3, but in 2010, he had 15 and a half. He left Clemson early, and he was selected in the 2nd round with the 51st overall pick by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You're probably wondering, well, dang, Matt, what happened? Why did he fall so low? And it's because he had some medical issues, and he also had off-season knee surgery. That put a heavy dent in his draft stock, and it cost him a couple of M's. Overall, his NFL career for the Buccaneers was somewhat of a letdown. He played in a lot of games, but rarely started, and the most sacks he ever had in a season was 3, and that was in 2012. I think saying he was an average NFL player might be giving him the benefit of the doubt. I think he was smart enough to realize his NFL career was coming to an end because in 2017, he signed with the Edmonton Eskimos out of the Canadian Football League. He only played with them in 1 season before announcing in 2018 he was going to retire from football. This is where he got into coaching, and he returned back to Clemson as a student assistant. Fast forward time a little bit into 2020, he was hired as a defensive line coach at South Florida. Nice to see that. At college, I would say due to him winning ACC Player of the Year or Defensive Player of the Year, my apologies, yes, lived it to the hype. In NFL, no, didn't even come close. In 2009, your #1 overall recruit in the nation was Matt Barkley, quarterback for USC. Ah, yes, good old Matt Barkley, stereotypical high school movie-looking quarterback. Barkley attended Mater Dei High School located in California, where he had 6,994 passing yards, so we'll just round that up to 7,000 for his career, and 57 touchdowns. He won a crap ton of awards, but one of the more notable ones was Gatorade National Player of the Year. Not too much to be said for the recruiting process. Played at Mater Dei High School, which is located, like I said, in California, and committed and signed with USC. Not controversial. Barkley's career at USC, it didn't start too hot. In his first year, he had 2,700 passing yards, but he had 15 touchdowns to 14 INTs. 2010, it was a little bit better, 26 touchdowns to 12 INTs, but in 2011, this one he made a big jump. Had 3,500 passing yards, completing nearly 70% of his passes, and had 39 touchdowns on only 7 INTs. That was the Matt Barkley we expected to see out of high school. Kind of shocked some people, and he announced he was going to return for his senior season in 2012, and it wasn't as good as his junior year. Completion percentage dropped nearly 6%, yards decreased, touchdowns decreased, and interceptions went up. And by Matt Barkley not leaving after his junior year and foregoing his final year eligibility, he cost himself a crap ton of money. If he would have left at that junior year, he would have easily been a top 15, top 20 pick. But after that not so stellar senior season, also had a shoulder injury, he fell all the way down to the 4th round. And that's why all these other players you've seen us talk about in this video, they're declaring after that 3rd year. It's for cases and examples just like this. Every now and then when you return for your final year, it can work out in your favor and you can improve your draft stock, but it's high risk, high reward. And I wouldn't even know if saying it's high risk, high reward doesn't any justice. Because Matt Barkley was going to be a 1st round pick after his junior year. And after his senior year, even if he would have balled down, he still would have been a 1st round pick. You see what I'm saying? It's more so of just a risky decision to return your final year if you know for sure you're going to be a 1st round pick. I digress. Getting back on track here. He fell to the 4th round with the 98th overall pick to the Philadelphia Eagles. Never got a legit shot with the Eagles, and his only, I guess you could say, real shot was in 2016 for the Bears, where he did start 6 games and went 1-5. In that season, he had 8 touchdowns to a miserable 14 INTs. But outside of that, there's not too much to be said. He was just a backup in the NFL. Not too many off-the-field problems, just a backup that made a good chunk of money and will never have to work another day in his life if he doesn't want to. Even till this day, he's still playing football, so it's kind of crazy. Did Matt Barkley live up to the hype in college? I would say, I don't know. I mean, he had a couple. I mean, that junior year was really good. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt and say yes, because in the NFL, nah, didn't even come close. And I have a hard time saying he lived it to the hype at USC because me personally, I always felt like he was somewhat of a letdown and he should have been a little bit better. That's just me because I remember everyone ranting and raving about him when he signed with USC. In 2010, the #1 overall recruit in the nation was Ronald Powell. As a defensive end, Powell would decide to commit and sign with Florida. In all 3 years at Florida, he made an impact. In 2011, he had 9 tackles for loss with 6 sacks, and in 2013, after missing the 2012 season, he had 22 tackles, 7 of those being for loss with 4 sacks. When he entered the 2014 NFL Draft, he was selected in the 5th round with the 169th overall pick by the New Orleans Saints. Long story short for Powell, he could never get healthy, and he only played 1 year in the NFL. He would bounce from practice squad to practice squad until finally, in 2018, he would sign with the AAF, which was the Alliance American Football League. Immediately after he signed with the AAF, they ceased operations, and he didn't play football elsewhere for any other team. Sadly, I do have a recent and unfortunate update on Ronald Powell. In early 2024, he passed away. The cause of his death was never released to the public, and I'm not going to speculate or assume. From all the research I've done, it looks like he had some problems, and we'll leave it at that. In 2011, the #1 overall recruit in the nation was Javon Clowney. Whew, man, oh man. Good old Javon Clowney, and every time I hear his name, I immediately think of the Michigan play. If you know, you know, and I am so proud and happy to announce I witnessed that live. That is, till this day, the hardest hit I've ever seen. I feel bad for the kids growing up nowadays that didn't get to witness Javon Clowney like I did. I believe I said another player in this video is a force to be reckoned with. Well, Javon Clowney, he was on their level. I'd go as far as just saying on the football field, he was a menace to society. Listen to these numbers. In high school, his senior season, he had 30 sacks. To go on top of that, he had 29 tackles for loss and 11 forced fumbles. The dude was a monster. Everybody wanted him, but he decided to commit and sign with South Kakalaki. And at South Kakalaki, that man was unreal. As a freshman, he had, a measly 12 tackles for loss and 8 sacks. If you can't tell, I'm joking when I say measly. He was getting double teamed left and right. In 2012, he had 23.5 tackles for loss with 13 sacks, still getting doubled and triple teamed. In 2013, getting dang near quadruple teamed, he only had 11.5 tackles for loss and 3 sacks. After playing for South Carolina in 2014, he was selected with the 1st overall pick by the Houston Texans. I'm not going to talk about his NFL career too much because we know how it went and we know how it's going. He's a great player. In 2012, the #1 overall recruit in the nation was Dorial Beckham, a wide receiver. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that's the first wide receiver we've talked about in this video. We got to make a separate video talking about Dorial Beckham's story because it's a long and crazy one, but I'm going to try to sum it up for you guys in this video. Absolute monster in high school, had 119 catches for 2,233 yards with 24 touchdowns in his senior season. This guy was supposed to be the next best thing since sliced bread. It's not too often you see wide receivers with that #1 overall spot. and the reasoning for that's not too complicated. He was 6'6", 220 pounds, and ran a 4.4 40-yard dash, and had great hands. If you were to create a demigod in a football game, it looks something like Dorial Beckham Jr. at the wide receiver position. He committed and signed with Missouri, and when he was available, and when he stayed out of trouble, he was fantastic. But that's the problem. He couldn't stay out of trouble. And what do I say time to time on this channel? Your best ability in this life is availability. He wasn't available. In his freshman season, he got arrested and suspended due to drug possession. After having a really good sophomore season, he got suspended from the Missouri football team and he had to go elsewhere. He was a troublemaker, that's all there is to it. No need to overcomplicate this, and it's sad because he could have been really good in college. After getting kicked off of Missouri, he tried to transfer to Oklahoma, but since he had to sit out an entire season because of the NCAA rules, he didn't even want to do that, so he announced he's going to enter the draft early. For all these NFL teams, executives, and GMs, he was an extremely hard player to evaluate. He was immensely talented, but at the same time, he was immensely stupid. He just made dumb decision after dumb decision after dumb decision. The Tennessee Titans did take a chance on him, and they selected him in the second round with the 48th overall pick. Played 1 year with the Titans in which he had 500 yards and 4 touchdowns, then for the Eagles in 2016 where he had 400 yards and 2 touchdowns, and that was it. In 2017, he was arrested for DWI, and in 2018, he was arrested for, guess what? Drugs. Fast forward time into 2021, he was arrested, again, shocker, for property damage and resisting arrest. I don't want to spend too much more time talking about this loser because it makes me mad. What a waste of talent. In 2013, the #1 overall recruit in the nation was Robert Nkemdiche. He was good for Ole Miss, don't get me wrong, but I don't feel like he lived up to the hype. That's how I feel. If you feel differently, I totally understand. But he never had over 3 sacks in one season. He did get selected in the first round with the 29th overall pick by the Arizona Cardinals in the 2016 NFL Draft. He did sign a decent contract that guaranteed him over $8 million. But all throughout his career, didn't do too much. His best season was in 2018 in which he started 6 games and had 4.5 sacks. Outside of that, pretty irrelevant. Signed with the Seattle Seahawks, nothing came out of that. In 2022, signed with the 49ers, he got released by them, and finally, he left the NFL in 2023 and signed with the Michigan Panthers out of the USFL, which is the United States Football League. And this is the bottom of the barrel. He got released by the USFL and joined the Canadian Football League in 2024. That's crazy. Former #1 overall recruit in the nation getting released, not by the NFL, which is understandable, but the USFL. Life comes at you fast, and most recently, in July of 2024, he was released by the Edmonton Elks out of the CFL, which is, like I said, the Canadian Football League. That is a really recent update because that happened a month ago, so hopefully he can turn this around, but it looks like his career, it's all but over. In 2014, the #1 overall recruit in the nation was Leonard Fournette. Leonard Fournette was a beast, and I still believe to this day he doesn't get the respect he not only deserves, but has earned. He is one of the very few running backs where I have literally been on the edge of my seat watching him run, especially in that year where he's leading the Heisman race in which Alabama shut him down, but different conversation for a different day, and Derrick Henry took over. But that year, I don't care. Leonard Fournette was must-see TV. I could care less that Derrick Henry won the Heisman that year. He was a great running back, don't get me wrong, but Fournette was more exciting to watch. And I still believe this, and I know some Bama fans aren't going to like this, but if you were to switch Leonard Fournette and Derrick Henry, switch the teams are on, I think Fournette was a Heisman that year. Leonard Fournette didn't have the offensive line that Derrick Henry had, and he didn't have the quarterback help that Derrick Henry had. This is not a Fournette and Henry debate, but I just got to throw that out there. At LSU, this man was a monster. In 2014, as a true freshman, had 187 carries for 1,000 yards, averaging 5.5 yards per carry with 10 touchdowns. In 2015, in the year in which, he was going off, he almost had 2,000 rushing yards. Averaged 6.5 yards per carry with 22 touchdowns on the ground. I don't care if I've harped on it a lot already. I'm going to continue to say it. That man was must-see TV. I remember vividly he was seeking out defenders to run over. He would have an open lane for a touchdown, but he would find a safety just so he could run him over. It was crazy. Love me some Leonard Fournette. He wound up being selected with the 4th overall pick in the 2017 NFL Draft by the Jaguars. Jaguars gave him a hefty contract of $27 million, with $18 million being guaranteed. His NFL career to me is similar to his college career. I think he's underappreciated. Of course, the Jaguars weren't too great when he was there, but he still had 2 1,000-yard seasons. But the Jaguars were trying to trade him, and since they couldn't trade him, they wound up waiving him. That is when the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in 2020, they signed him to a 1-year deal. And ever since that 2019 season with Jacksonville in which he had 1,000 rushing yards, he's kind of struggled a little bit. I will say I was really happy to see him win a Super Bowl with Tom Brady and have an impact in some big-time games. But outside of that Super Bowl run, yeah, it hasn't been good for Fournette. I hope he can turn things around because I've really enjoyed watching him play at LSU and in the NFL. As far as it goes for living up to the hype, LSU, NFL, some people would say probably not, but no, I'd say he did. And the beauty of his career and story is I don't even think it's close to being over. He's not even 30 years old. In 2015, the #1 overall recruit in the nation was defensive tackle Trent Thompson. I remember him being hyped up in high school, and it was mainly due to his size. Was he polished? Absolutely not, but you don't really rank these high school kids off of how polished they are because you're banking on the fact that they'll get polished at the next level. At Georgia, he was, I'd say, good, but not even close to being great. And for some odd reason, he decided to forego his final year eligibility and declare for the NFL draft early. I know what some of you are going to say, well, Matt, you said earlier with Matt Barkley, you should do that. And yeah, you should if you're projected to be a first or second round pick. Trent Thompson was not. And you'll see what I'm talking about in just a second, or actually not a second, right now. He went undrafted in the 2018 NFL draft. Goes back to this. As to why he entered the draft early, I have no idea. And that's embarrassing to enter the draft early and go undrafted. I don't care what anybody says. He did sign with the Cleveland Browns as an undrafted free agent, but he got waived like a month or two after, and he never played in the NFL, not even a single snap. He went straight to the Alliance American Football League, which is the AAF, and that was in 2019. That league shut down, and he signed with the Edmonton Eskimos out of the CFL. But only 3 days after signing with them, he was released. He then signed to the Houston Roughnecks out of the XFL, but he was also waived from them shortly after. Signed with the Saskatchewan Roughriders out of the CFL, but they released him as well in 2021. And finally, in 2022, he signed with the Vegas Nighthawks out of the Indoor Football League. This guy's just trying all these different leagues, but he was released by them in 2023. Man, oh man, it doesn't get too much worse than that, getting released by an Indoor Football League. And that is the most recent update on Mr. Trent Thompson. I can't help but wonder if he would have stayed for his senior year at Georgia, how differently his career would have played out. And maybe it wouldn't have affected it, but I feel like if he would have been a, let's just say, 5th or 6th round pick in the NFL, he would have at least gotten his foot in the door. But I don't know, maybe that wouldn't have helped too much, because even with these indoor football leagues and Canadian Football League teams, he can't even stay on their rosters. I think this is a classic case and example of someone who peaked way too early. In 2016, the #1 overall recruit in the nation was defensive tackle Rashod Gary. You should be familiar with Rashod Gary. He was a beast at Michigan. After 3 years at Michigan, he decided to forego his senior year of eligibility, and this is when you want to do it, when you're projected to be a first-round pick. All my top high school recruits out there and college football players, take notes. Anyways, getting back on track, he got selected with the 12th overall pick in the 2019 NFL Draft by the Green Bay Packers. This is an extremely short one, but if I can keep things simple, it's what I like to do. He is still playing with the Packers. In 2017, the #1 overall recruit in the nation was Jaylen Phillips. Jaylen Phillips attended UCLA where he was battling some injury problems before finally transferring to Miami. For Miami, he was exceptional, and he decided to forego his final year of eligibility and declare for the 2021 NFL Draft. And it paid off because he was selected in the first round with the 18th overall pick by the Miami Dolphins. And that is where he remains till this day. He's with the Dolphins, and I'd say he's been pretty good for them so far. In 2018, the #1 overall recruit in the nation was Trevor Lawrence. And come on, man, do you really want me to sit up here and tell you Trevor Lawrence's story? You know how it goes. Went to Clemson, balled out, and beat Alabama in the national championship, was the #1 overall pick in the draft, and he is still the starting quarterback for the Jaguars. End of story. That is arguably the most known story out of all of these guys. At least with like Adrien Peterson, I don't mind explaining that one because some people might have forgot about it, but with Lawrence, we're all familiar. In 2019, the #1 overall recruit in the nation, I low-key forgot he was the #1 overall recruit. It was Nolan Smith. This was one of the star players for Georgia that led that outstanding defense. Balled out for Georgia, and he was selected in the first round with the 30th overall pick by the Philadelphia Eagles. That just happened, and really his career in the NFL is just getting started. In 2020, the #1 overall recruit in the nation was defensive tackle Breech. Breech is one of the better players Clemson has ever had on their roster. He did tear his ACL in the 2021 season, but after that, he got healthy and he declared for the 2023 NFL Draft. This is where he was selected with the 29th overall pick by the New Orleans Saints. Like all these guys we're talking about from this point on, their NFL career is just getting started. In 2021, the number 1 overall recruit in the nation was quarterback Quinn Ewers. He originally committed to the little bro Ohio State, but now he's at Texas and he's still in college. That's really all there is for that, but I tell you this much, I love me some Quinn Ewers. He is one of the best quarterbacks I've ever evaluated coming out of high school. Love everything about his game, but let's move on to our last couple of players. In 2022, no introduction needed, the number 1 overall recruit in the nation was cornerback / wide receiver, that should give you a hint, Travis Hunter. As we all know or should know, prestigious recruit, started out at Jackson State, teamed up with Deion Sanders, had a huge controversial signing day because many people thought he was going to go to the Cinnamon Rolls in Florida State. He said, nope, not going to happen. I'm going with my boy Deion, Coach Prime Time, and now he's at Colorado. Safe to say he's going to make a lot of money in the future. Shout out to you, Travis. Wishing you the best of luck. In 2023, the number 1 overall recruit in the nation was Arch Manning. Not only has Arch Manning's NFL career not even started, but his college career hasn't even started. And it's funny to think about this, but Texas currently has 2 of the top overall recruits in the nation in recent history. And not only did they get 2 of them, but they're currently on the same team. And not only are they on the same team, we can take it a step farther, they play the same position. How about that? His career hasn't even started, so yeah, there's not too much to be said there. And I guess I could talk about the top overall recruit in 2024, but it's the same thing, career hasn't started. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, there you have it. That is what happened to every single number 1 overall recruit from 2000 all the way up into 2023, 2024, whatever you want to call it, the current date and time. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. It took a lot of time and a lot of research, so if you do enjoy videos like this, consider subscribing to the channel, joining our college football community. We'd love to have you here. I'm curious. Let me know your thoughts on all this down below, but Roman.